Welcome to Reformed Thinking. We're the place you come to for a deep dive into, well, foundational concepts straight from Scripture. And today we're really zeroing in on a word you see just hundreds of times in the Hebrew Bible. It's a word that's absolutely central, I think, to understanding God himself and how he interacts with humanity. That word is holiness. We're going to unpack the Hebrew terms kodo, and also mikdash. Our mission really for this deep dive is to try and grasp the multifaceted nature of holiness, not just as some abstract idea, but as something really concrete, something that shapes places, objects, people, even time itself. We want to see how it actually operated day to day in ancient Israel and maybe think about what it means for us.
That's right. That's exactly the goal. We want to get a really clear view of how holiness functions, its different dimensions, you could say, and how it really shaped the Israelite way of life. Every part of it will trace how God himself sets things apart, places, people, specific times, all for his own purposes. You'll see this idea of holiness is just fundamental to what the Bible reveals about God's character and, well, his desires for his creation.
Okay, so let's dive in, the foundational definition first. When we look at those Hebrew terms, kwasha and krodok, what's the absolute core idea they're getting across?
Well, at its heart, both kwashak and kwado, they fundamentally signify apartness, or you could say sacredness, the state of being set apart. It's all about distinction.
Separation.
Separation.
Yeah. Okay.
And here's something that really helps clarify it. This concept stands in direct contrast to another Hebrew word, hirsh. Here means common or ordinary.
So it's the opposite of everyday stuff.
Exactly. This opposition shows that whatever is holy is separated. It's distinct from the mundane. And because it's distinct, it demands careful treatment, reverence. It means it's reserved for a special purpose, usually because God has specifically claimed it or his presence is there.
So it's not simply good in the way we might normally use the word. It's more specific than that. It's set apart. Set apart for God's special use, or maybe even his presence itself. That separation seems absolutely key.
It is. It creates these tangible boundaries, designations within the world. It shows holiness isn't some vague spiritual feeling. It's about dedication, consecration, something being uniquely for God.
Now, our sources point out that the grammatical forms of krusha actually affect its specific meaning. They add nuances. Can you walk us through those different forms, how they shift the meaning slightly?
Certainly. Let's start with the singular form. This can denote holiness as, well, an abstract quality, just sacredness in general. For instance, you read in Amos 4.2 or Psalm 89 that God swears by his holiness.
Right, that's not a physical thing.
No, exactly. It's pointing to his inherent nature, his character. His holiness is the ultimate guarantee.
Okay, abstract quality. What else?
Well, in many contexts, kash actually functions more like an adjective in English. It describes something as holy. Think of holy ground. Nemash Dairath back in Exodus 3.5. Moses at the burning bush.
Yeah, the ground wasn't special before God showed up.
Precisely. God's presence made it distinct, sacred. Or think about the holy garments, B'tzam and Christ for the priests in Exodus 28. These weren't just nice clothes. They attributed that quality of set-apartness to the priests, marking them for divine service.
So it describes something as having that quality.
Yes, and it can also refer to a holy thing, or what is holy, just in a general sense. Anything distinct from the common. This could be holy foods, maybe things only priests could eat, or sacred vessels used in worship, or the Sabbath, which is called Shabbat.
A holy Sabbath, set apart time.
Exactly, a day distinct from the other six, reserved. Then, when you see Hashia with the definite article, ha, it specifically designates the holy place.
Ah, the holy place.
Yes, the outer room of the tabernacle or the temple. And this area was characterized by limited access. Only priests could go in there, and only when ritually pure. It held specific sacred items, like the table of showbread, the incense altar, a distinctly sacred area.
Okay, that makes sense. So singular, abstract quality, descriptive, a holy thing, or the holy place. What about the plural form? You mentioned Qodashim. What does that tell us?
Right, the plural quayam, or sometimes hakoshim with the article. This most notably refers to votive offerings, or you could say holy gifts, sacred donations.
Things people gave to God.
Yes, items or funds individuals dedicated to God, for the temple, for the worship. The sources mention money for votive offerings, silver perhaps, or animals like sheep offered as holy gifts. It really highlights how individuals actively participated by dedicating their own stuff, making it holy by giving it to God.
So it covers those dedicated gifts.
It does, and it can also just mean more broadly all the holy things. a collective term for everything set apart for divine use. Got it. And then there's that really intense one, the construct state, or Gratian, holiness of holinesses. That sounds like an
Whoa.
absolute peak.
It is. That phrasing, holiness of holinesses, it denotes something extremely holy or most holy. It's like a superlative. It is the specific term for the most holy place, also called the Holy of Holies, or sometimes Deber.
The innermost room.
The very innermost, most sacred part of the tabernacle or temple. This is where the Lord's unique presence was understood to dwell most intensely, and access. Extremely limited.
Only the high priest, once a year.
Exactly. Only the high priest, only on the Day of Atonement, and only after intense purification rituals. That restriction just underlines its incredible sacredness.
Wow.
And that term, koshkoashim, it doesn't just apply to the room. It also applies to certain sacred objects and offerings that require the absolute highest degree of consecration, extreme care. Things like specific sacrifices, sin offerings, guilt offerings, certain food offerings. The altar itself was considered most holy, and of course the Ark of the Covenant, housed within the Holy of Holies. So these things carried a kind of concentrated holiness.
You could say that, demanding extreme care. Any mistake could be dangerous.
It's really clear then, holiness isn't just a label someone slaps on something. It gets conveyed somehow. It becomes real. So how does this apartness actually happen? How does something become holy? The sources talk about interconnected mechanism.
You do. It's a dynamic process. The first mechanism, the ultimate source, is God's own intrinsic nature. Holiness is his inherent attribute. God is intrinsically Qodesh. He's characterized by majesty, transcendence, inviolability. He's utterly distinct, separate from all creation, all impurity.
So it starts with God himself.
Absolutely. And this divine holiness, it extends to everything directly connected to him. His name, often called Shem Korche, my holy name. It's sacred, not to be profaned. His spirit, Ru Kwacho, his Holy Spirit. His word, Dike, holy words. And his actions. Think of Exodus 15 again. Majestic in holiness revealed in his victory. Everything flowing from his character radiates his sacredness.
Okay, so God is holy, and things connected to his nature reflect that. It's like a source radiating outwards. What about the places and objects then? The ones we see designated as holy, how do they get that quality?
That brings us to the second mechanism, divine presence and consecration. Holiness is conveyed through God's actual presence in a specific location, or upon certain objects, certain individuals. That presence makes them sacred. This can happen by God's direct initiative, like at the burning bush, or it can happen through human dedication, using specific rituals to set something apart for divine purposes.
Okay, so presence or deliberate setting apart, how does that apply to places?
It applies very clearly to places. A holy place, often called Midash or Kia, is basically where God dwells, where he's normally present. This obviously includes the Tabernacle and the Temple. The text explicitly calls them Migash or Kasha because God's presence was there, his dwelling place.
The main sanctuaries.
Yes. And also specific areas within those sanctuaries. We already mentioned the holy place and the most holy place. They had different degrees of God's presence, different levels of access, creating a kind of gradient of holiness. And it wasn't just the tabernacle or temple, other sites too, Mount Sinai, for instance. It was set apart as sacred when God descended upon it. Jerusalem is frequently called the Holy City, Ir Hakyush, or My Holy Mountain, Har Karsha, because of God's choice to associate his name and presence there, specifically with the temple site.
So location matters because God chooses to be present there.
Presence is key for places, and it also makes objects and offerings holy. Anything dedicated and consecrated to the Lord is considered kyush. This is usually conveyed through ritual acts of consecration, setting something apart. Think of the sacred vessels and furniture for the tabernacle or temple. The lampstand, the altars. They weren't just tools. Their use in worship made them holy. The special anointing oil and incense. These were designated as holy material, used in rituals to consecrate people or places. Sacrificial animals and offerings, obviously. There are crushim. Some, as we said, were crushim, most holy. They were set apart as offerings, handled carefully, often consumed only by priests in a holy place. Votive offerings, the quashim things people gave. Sacred donations. Again, something common becomes holy by dedication to God. Even spoils of war sometimes. Booty could be consecrated to Yahweh, dedicated to him.
It's really striking how physical and tangible this is. Objects, places. What about people? How do individuals or groups become holy?
That leads us right to the third mechanism, the separation of people. Holiness is conveyed to people when they are set apart by God for his purposes. or sometimes through their own devotion to him. The clearest examples are the priests and Levites. They're called Chesha, holy. They wear holy garments, specifically because they are consecrated, set apart for divine service. Their whole role marks them as distinct.
Mediators between God and the people.
In a sense, yes. And then there's the entire nation of Israel, repeatedly called a holy people, Im Choi, or holy to Yahweh, Keshalewa. This points to their special status, chosen and set apart by God from all other nations, not because they were better, but because of God's sovereign choice.
Set apart for a purpose.
For his purposes, yes, to bear his name, to be his witnesses. And it could apply to individuals, too. Prophets are sometimes described as holy, signifying their special calling, their closeness to God. Nazarites took special vows, setting themselves apart for a time of intense dedication. And you even see Job consecrating his sons, a personal act of setting them apart for God's blessing within the family.
Okay, so people can be set apart by God or through their own vows or actions of dedication. And you mentioned time itself. How can time be holy? That's still hard to picture.
Yeah, it's a fascinating aspect. The fourth mechanism is the consecration of time. Specific periods are consecrated, kept sacred, distinguishing them from ordinary common time. It creates sacred rhythms. The most obvious example is the Sabbath, Shabbat Kocho, a holy day. Set apart right from creation, the texts imply. Reserved for rest and worship, it literally interrupts the normal flow of the week.
A holy pause.
A holy pause, exactly, declaring that a portion of our time belongs uniquely to God. Then there are the holy convocations, Mikra Kresia. These were special assemblies called at set times for worship, like the annual feast, Passover, weeks, booths. These were holy occasions for the community to gather. And also the year of Jubilee, that special 50th year.
Right, the reset year.
Yes, it was observed as holy, a time for rest for the land, release of debts, return of property. You reset things to reflect God's justice and sovereignty. These designated times are like markers, creating periods dedicated to God, reinforcing his claim on all of life, including time itself.
It definitely sounds like getting holiness, whether for a place or a person or time, isn't the end of the story. It seems like it needs to be actively maintained, guarded. It's an ongoing thing.
That's a critical point. Absolutely critical. This is the fifth mechanism, purity in conduct. Holiness is also conveyed and maintained through the ongoing maintenance of both ritual and moral purity. This distinction between holy and common or profane, it required constant vigilance.
How so? Ritually.
Or ritually, to interact with holy things, or even just to enter holy spaces, individuals had to maintain ceremonial cleanliness. This meant following specific laws, specific cleansing procedures, like washing or waiting a certain period after becoming unclean. This created a clear distinction, as Leviticus says, between the holy and the common.
Sure.
These laws weren't just arbitrary rules. They reinforced the sacredness of God's presence, the seriousness of approaching him. They were like guardrails.
Protecting God's holiness and the people, too.
Yes, protecting the people from the sheer intensity of that holiness. But beyond the ritual aspect, there's the deeply important concept of moral purity. For people, holiness is conveyed through moral goodness, uprightness, actively emulating God's character.
The "be holy for I am holy" command.
Precisely. That command echoes through Leviticus, for example, Leviticus 20.26. You shall be holy to me, for I, the Lord, am holy, and have separated you from the peoples, that you should be mine. This isn't just about avoiding unclean food or touching a dead body. It's a call to reflect God's very nature. Compassion, justice, mercy, righteousness, these are core to God's character, and therefore core to the holiness he calls his people to.
So the moral life is part of holiness.
An essential part. The Mosaic Law provided that external standard, the guidelines for living this distinct consecrated life. And it's not just human effort. The texts also say God himself causes himself to be hallowed, and he works to keep his people pure and sacred. It shows that this transformation is a divine work, happening in response to his initiative in setting them apart. It's a call to a complete life, set apart in ritual, yes, but also in their very being, their actions, reflecting the moral perfection of the God who called them.
Let's zoom in on one of those terms again, mikdash. You said it means sacred place or sanctuary. How specifically does it relate to a holy location? Is it always a building?
Mikdash primarily means that, yes, sacred place or sanctuary. It denotes a consecrated place where God dwells, where he's normally present, where sacred objects are kept, where worship happens, and its holiness comes directly from that divine presence. Our sources stress it often refers to a building dedicated to God's service, a place where the Lord is normally present if ritual and moral purity are maintained.
Okay, so it's tied to presence and purity.
Right. It refers clearly to the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, and its precincts. Leviticus 16 uses a related phrase, midash hakosha, and later, of course, it denotes the Jerusalem temple and its precincts, including specific areas within it. It could also refer to earlier Israelite sanctuaries, perhaps Shiloh where the ark rested. And interestingly, as we noted, it's not exclusively for Israelite places. It can sometimes refer to sanctuaries of other nations, like Moab or Tyre.
Showing the concept of a dedicated sacred space was wider.
It seems so, even if the object of worship was different. But what's really fascinating is how Mikdash gets used prophetically. It's used to describe a future sanctuary, or even God as the sanctuary. Ezekiel 11:16, for instance. God promises the exiles, "Yet I have been to them a little sanctuary in Mikdash in the countries where they have gone."
Wow, so even without the temple building, God himself becomes their holy place.
Like a powerful image. His presence becomes their protection, their sacred space, even in exile. And Ezekiel 37 promises a future, everlasting sanctuary within them, an intimate, enduring presence that goes beyond any physical building.
That really expands the meaning. From a physical building to God himself being the sanctuary, that's quite a shift.
Okay, let's revisit the Holy of Holies Kushim. That phrase for something extremely holy evokes such a sense of awe, of untouchability almost.
It absolutely does. It signifies the most sacred, the extremely holy part within the Tabernacle and Temple, the absolute epicenter of holiness. It's that specific innermost part of the sacred building, uniquely separated, dedicated, considered the central point of God's presence. Think of it like layers of increasing sanctity, and this is the very core.
And the access was so restricted. Behind the veil?
Yes, separated from the holy place by that thick veil, the parshan. That veil wasn't just fabric. It symbolized the immense gap, the awe required between a holy God and sinful humanity. And inside, primarily the Ark of the Covenant itself, a most holy thing, holding the tablets of the law. This innermost room is also called the Debir, meaning the back room or oracle place, a place of ultimate sanctity.
Are there key passages that mention it specifically? Oh, yes. Exodus 26.33 describes its setup in the tabernacle. 1 Kings 8.6 and 2 Chronicles 3.8 talk about placing the ark there in Solomon's temple. Sometimes, in prophecy like Daniel 9.24, the phrase might even refer to the temple complex more generally, highlighting its supreme sacredness in that context.
Okay, now let's circle back to those votive offerings, the koshim. What exactly were these, and why were they important for sort of everyday holiness practice?
Right, the votive offerings. These were essentially holy gifts, sacred donations that individuals dedicated or consecrated to God. The plural kashim is the typical term. And their purpose was very clear. These were sacred things, set apart for the worship, for the cult, dedicated to the Lord. They were explicitly separated from the common, the hush, and because of that, had to be treated with care and reverence.
So it was a way for individuals to actively participate in setting things apart for God.
Exactly. A tangible act of devotion. And they could take various forms. Money was common, money for votive offerings, like silver dedicated to the temple treasury. Animals, too, like sheep offered as holy gifts, beyond the standard required sacrifices. Treasures, spoils from war, could be consecrated. 1 Kings 7 mentions David bringing koshim, holy gifts, likely treasures, to dedicate to the temple project.
So quite a range of things could become holy gifts.
Yes, and they even had designated storerooms, shuhokwa koshim, for them in the temple complex. This shows they were managed carefully, kept separate. They were sacred, meant for religious use, supporting the priests, maintaining the sanctuary, not for personal gain.
It's helpful to see the whole timeline the sources lay out. And the cast of characters involved. It gives a real sense of how holiness unfolds through the biblical story. Can you paint that picture for us? Trace that development.
Sure. It's a narrative that starts early and runs right through. We see holiness declared right at the beginning, with God at the burning bush declaring the ground holy ground, just because he's there. Exodus 3. Soon after, in the Song of the Sea, God himself is praised as majestic in holiness. Exodus 15. His nature. Then at Sinai, the whole nation of Israel is designated a holy nation, Goykosh, Exodus 19, and they're commanded to consecrate themselves before approaching God. Purification is required. God also sets apart the seventh day, establishing the Sabbath as holy time, Exodus 20.
So right away, place, God's nature, people, and time are marked as holy.
Exactly. Then comes the command to build a sanctuary, the Mikoja, Exodus 25, and it's specifically designed with levels of holiness. The holy place, the most holy place, separated by the veil. The priestly garments are specified as holy garments, marking the individuals. Fast forward to the monarchy, King David brings those votive offerings, Qodesh, dedicating resources, 1 Kings 7. Later, a prophet like Elisha is called holy by the Shunammite woman in 2 Kings 4, signifying his divine connection. And Isaiah's vision, of course, the seraphim crying, holy, 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 Qodesh, 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 Isaiah 6, highlighting God's supreme intrinsic holiness.
It continues even through exile.
Yes, the concept remains absolutely central. Ezekiel hears God promise to be a sanctuary, a mitzvah for the exiles, Ezekiel 11. And even after the return, Nehemiah refers to Jerusalem as the holy city, Nehemiah 11. Its sacred status endures. Zechariah even looks forward to a time when holiness will permeate everything. Even everyday objects like pots and horse bells will be holy to the Lord, Zechariah 14.
That's quite a trajectory. And who are the key figures, the main players we should keep in mind when thinking about holiness in the Bible?
Well, number one absolutely is Yahweh himself, the God of Israel. He is intrinsically Qodesh. His name is holy, his spirit is holy, his word is holy, he's the source of all holiness. Then you have the nation of Israel as a collective, called to be a holy nation, a holy people, set apart by God's covenant.
The chosen people.
Chosen and set apart. Then, more specifically, the priests and Levites. They are consecrated for divine service, explicitly called holy, wearing those holy garments. Aaron, the first high priest, is a key figure here. Individuals can also be holy. Nazarites take special vows. Prophets are sometimes described as holy, reflecting their dedication and calling. We saw Job consecrating his sons. Even non-human figures, angels, are identified as holy ones.
And rulers played a role.
Yes, kings like David bringing votive offerings shows their role in supporting and dedicating things to God's holy service. And interestingly, the sources mention, almost as a counterpoint, Baal's assembly being consecrated by his worshippers. It shows the concept of dedication for religious purposes existed elsewhere, but often from the biblical perspective, directed towards false gods and involving impure practices.
Which brings us to that term, quado, the temple prostitute. You mentioned it's explicitly noted as unrelated, despite the sound similarity.
Yes, and that's a crucial distinction. Quado, despite sounding similar to quado, refers to someone involved in cultic prostitution. These practices were common in some surrounding pagan religions, but were vehemently condemned in Israelite law. It represents a complete perversion of true sacredness. It highlights the stark contrast between Yahweh's call to moral and ritual purity and the often immoral practices associated with other deities. True holiness for God is about purity and righteousness, never about sexual immorality used in worship. It underscores that distinction.
We've definitely touched on this all the way through, but it feels like we need to underline it one more time. The moral and ethical dimension of holiness. It's not just about external rituals, is it? It's about our character.
It absolutely is foundational. You can't separate them in the biblical view. While holiness certainly involves being ritually set apart from the common, it strongly embodies moral purity and goodness. That command, be holy Qodesh, because I, Yahweh, am holy Qodesh, it's a direct call to emulate God's character.
Yeah, so holiness is reflected in how we live, how we treat others.
Exactly. Through compassion, mercy, justice, uprightness. These are reflections of God's own holy character. The Mosaic Law provided that framework, those external standards, to help shape the people towards that moral holiness. But again, it's not just human striving. God himself is active in making his people holy, in setting them apart, in enabling that transformation. It's a response to his initiative, a call to a whole life lived distinctly, set apart in obedience, and reflecting his moral perfection in our actions and attitudes.
This has been incredibly helpful, this deep dive into Kashi, Qador, and Migash. It really shows just how comprehensive this idea of holiness is in Scripture. It's not just some minor theme. It feels woven into the very fabric of God's character and how he relates to the world he made. It touches everything.
It really does. It reveals a God who is himself utterly distinct, utterly pure. And yet, in his amazing plan, his creation invites us into a relationship with him, into a separated, set-apart life. A life that involves both, well, appropriate reverence and ritual, but fundamentally moral uprightness that reflects him. He gives us a framework for understanding who he is and what he desires for us, a life that mirrors his glory.
So maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to take away. If holiness fundamentally means set apart by God or for God, how might really grasping that ancient concept reshape your daily choices right now? How does knowing that you're called to live a distinct life, a life set apart in response to God's own holy character and his call on you, how might that change the way you view your purpose today? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive at Reformed Thinking.